Hey everybody, this is the camera tracking tutorial, and this is what we're hoping to achieve today. I'll just play it back for you. So what we've got here is, I'm just going to turn the sound off so it doesn't bug us each time. What we've got here is a replaced license plate on the car. It's a pretty fast, ropey job. But I wanted to give you the skills to use it, the technique, rather than spend a lot of time finishing it. So what I've done is I've replaced the license plate on my car with a silly license plate, and you can see that tracks to the front of the car more or less. There's a few dodgy bits here and there, but especially at the start where it's in the shadow, you can see it just wobbles a bit there. But for the most part, it is pretty solid to the car. So, how do we do this? Well, let's have a go. So the first things, we've got a movie of the car here. I'm just going to pull that into a new composition. And you can see there is the shot. And in fact, I think I trimmed it to 250 frames. So I'm just going to do that for this as well. So find 250, press N, short key, to close the work area, and then Control Shift X, or Command Shift X, sorry, if you're on a Mac, to make the whole piece that long. And then I'm going to right click on our footage, and I'm going to go to Track and Stabilize, Track Camera. You'll see this blue warning thing appears, telling you that it's analyzing the footage in the background. This might take a while, especially on your Macs at school, because they're not as fast as my home computer will be. So apologies if this takes 10 minutes. Go make a cup of tea, and we'll worry about it in a bit. Basically what it's doing here is it's looking at each frame of the composition and trying to work out the camera movement that's going on, and then recreating a three-dimensional space. So you can see here that it has done that for mine, and what we get here is a lot of little track points that represent different items in the scene, and you can see the bigger ones are close to the camera and the little ones are further away, and if we're lucky, that gives us the Z depth of the film, as well as the rotation and scale position for everything in it. Now you can see as I scroll through, some of them disappear. Don't worry about that, that's just the computer readjusting points that are worth tracking. But you can see most of the ones on the car and the windows at the back of the house up here, most of them kind of stay in the same position through the shot. The reason the ones on the ground don't is because it's very wet and sparkly, so they're shifting a lot. But they know where they are. You can see they all look like they're on the same plane. So the bit we're concerned with is obviously the license plate, and you can see as I drag my mouse around, what I'm getting is this little target shape, and what it's doing is it's trying to find a plane between points, and then it's using that circle to represent the central point of that plane, and you can see the rings shift in perspective to show what plane it's lying on, what it thinks it's lying on. So the ones on the side of the car will be more side on, if we're lucky, like that, and the ones on the top of the car will look more flat to the roof, sorry, to the sky. So the ones we're looking for are on the license plate, and you can see here as I drag around the license plate, depending on which points I use to make my circle, it'll look more or less like it's sticking to the actual license plate. So I think that's probably, that one there, it's probably the best. That looks like it's on the front of the car, flat to the license plate. Now obviously the license plate is actually a three-dimensional object. It curves slightly in space. So that's why the track's going off in the movement at the start. It's because the license plate isn't actually a flat plane. It's slightly curved to the front of the car. But that looks good enough at the moment. Apologise for my phone going off. So what we're going to do is we're going to move our mouse until we get something that looks like it's on the front of the car. Hopefully your track will do the same. If it hasn't, then choose the one you think is best. And then right click and go to create solid and camera. And the reason I like to create a solid is because I like to get an idea of the rotation of the plane we've chosen in 3D space that the circle doesn't provide. So you can see we put the circle there. You can see now that it fits in the box, but at the time it wasn't very easy to see that it's actually tilted to the plate, and we'll need to correct that. So that's why I like to choose that rather than a null object which you won't be able to see on the picture. So the next thing we need to do is we can now turn off our camera tracker because we don't need that anymore. And you'll see, by the way, that when it's solved, when we created a solid in camera, we've got a camera here and the solid. So now, and if I change the mode here, you'll see this is a three-dimensional solid. So it has distance in space as well as width and height. So there's your camera, and anything that we now put into the scene will operate like a 3D object. So for example, if I just chuck another solid in, let's make it yellow so it stands out, and then we'll just pop the 3D icon on there, and you can see instantly it goes out because the 0 point for this shot, the perspective point on 0, is not in the middle of the screen, it's further down the road. So we can move that around. If we move the Z depth, it will move into the distance, and we can move it up, and you'll see it changes shape because it has perspective now. And we can rotate that on any axis we desire. Maybe rotate on the Z axis, and then depending on where you've placed it in space, as you scroll through, you'll see it now moves around the space. So it's kind of hovering above the car, slightly to the left at the moment. So that's just to show you that there is 3D space here now. Yeah. And were we to create a whole load of other solids or nulls around, we could choose to take that information and connect it to this, so that this displayed somewhere maybe on the side of the car or on a window or whatever. So that's just to show you the 3D space. So we'll delete that, we don't need that for the moment. But what we do need is a replacement license plate. And the easiest way to do this is just to create one in After Effects. You could actually just get a JPEG of one off the internet, or whatever, copyright, that stuff. But you can just make one. So let's do that now. New solid, and let's make it a kind of license plate color. It's kind of an off-white. Make it the comp size for the moment, and then let's double click our shape. Sorry, first of all, let's make sure we've got rounded rectangle, because they have a kind of curve on the corners. And select that, and that'll make a rounded rectangle. You can just see the points in there. And then I'm going to double click that mask, and I'm going to click on the selection points around the outside of the mask, and then I'm going to hold Command on a Mac or Control on a PC, and I'm going to scale it down a little bit, and I'm just going to scale it in a little bit. So now you've got your basic license plate shape. Don't worry about the footage underneath. You can even turn that off at the moment with the hide layer visibility switch over here, if it's bothering you. And let's call those layers. So you hit return to change the layer name once it's selected. Let's call it license plate. And then let's just Command, Shift and C to pre-compose it. And we're going to move all attributes into new composition and call it license plate. So now we have a composition with a license plate in. We can go in and we can start making it look better. So let's create a new solid. Let's call it Let's make a kind of blue colour, like that. And let's apply the same mask to it that we did before. So open up your license plate layer, take the mask off your license plate, hit Command C to copy it, select your blue layer, Command V to paste it, and then we're going to use another mask. So we're going to go up here and we're going to choose a rectangle, and we're going to use that on our blue solid to get rid of some of the blue. So you know how license plates have a little sort of blue edge to the corner if they're from the UK. So we're going to draw another mask, but this mask we're going to say subtract. And we're going to get that. So it's going to subtract the area we drew from the original shape that we had on the first mask. And then maybe we're going to get a new solid, and we're going to make this a kind of dark colour, maybe not that dark, maybe sort of an off black. And then we're going to take the original mask again. I'm going to Command C and go to the black layer and Command V. Then we're going to open that up. We're going to press V to choose our arrow tool up here. And then we're going to double click the mask. And we're going to scale it down holding Command so that we get an equal scale. You can move it around so it just sits inside our original shape. In fact, now we've got a blue edge there, I think what I'd like to do is include that in this. So I'm going to take that mask off the dark grey. I'm going to copy that and I'm going to replace the mask on the blue with that one so that the blue sits inside the black now. Go back to your black solid, and then we're going to duplicate that mask. And we're going to click subtract. And then we're just going to change that mask's shape a little bit. Using Command again, we're going to bring it in a bit. You can mess around with how much. Something like that. So now we've got a black box inside the white with the blue over there. And then I think we're going to use, I'm going to right click new text. Actually, no, we're not going to do that. We're just going to go up here to the text tool. Click the text tool. And then over here, choose, if you've got it, choose Calidea, because I think it works well for the moment. And click in your box and type whatever you want on your license plate. So we used Boss1, very arrogant and capitalist boss. Maybe I've earned £1 million doing special effects and feeling rather pleased with myself. So we stick that on, and then you can move it around, make sure you feel like it's central, or in fact you could use the align tool to center it on the center layer, which, wow, I actually was on the center layer, so that's pretty good. And then maybe just let's add a little bit of gumph at the bottom. So let's choose text again, and let's make the size a lot smaller. Bring it right down so you can hardly see it, because we don't really want to read this. We just want to use it as texture, essentially. And then put I am the best at special. Oh, I've typed it in the wrong place. Let's try again. There we go. There, maybe. Get out of that box. What have I done? Start again. Right. Click down here. No, don't want that there. There. I am the best at special effects, which is clearly neither true nor something you should be claiming to your friends. The reason it looks so blocky is that I've got my stroke up high because I wanted this kind of grey on black effect. But you can see once I take that away, you can actually read that. I'm the best at special effects, and I get paid the big bucks. So I make my crappy car look more stupid than it already is. And go back to your selection tool, click your layer, and then just move that around so that it sits kind of at the bottom, as if it was like garage info or something like that. And then one more thing we want to do, we want to texture this in some way. So I'm going to create a new solid, and I'm going to choose a kind of grey colour. And then I am going to make a kind of vignette on the right hand side by using the pen tool, clicking this mask, and then I'm just going to change these points by selecting the convert vertex tool so they're curved. I think that's nicer. You can switch between the curved vertex tool and your pen tool by pressing G to switch to the various pen tool bits, and you'll see it changes up here as I do it. Up there. Or V will change to your selection tool, so you can move between the two. So we've got a kind of shadow edge to this in some fashion, something like that. Just give it a little bit of 3D feel. So what we're going to do then is we're going to set the layer mode on this layer to multiply. So if you click your solid and you go down here to toggle switches and modes, change that to multiply, you'll see you can see the layer below. Then we're going to feather the mask. So with your layer selected, press F, and that will bring up your feather control, and then you can just pull that out till it looks reasonable. Don't want it to band too much, but something like that. Maybe we can pull the sides away a bit more. No, that's not going to help. That'll be okay, something like that. So maybe that's a bit too much actually. Let's add that back in because it's not central. Yeah, so when you're happy with the kind of curve on it, maybe we'll just bring the transparency down a bit. Highlight your layer and press T for the transparency tool control, and then just bring it down to maybe 75-ish, something like that, just so there's a little hint of shadowing. And now what we need to do is get rid of it from the outside. So we're going to go to our license plate layer, and we're going to press M to select the mask. We're going to command copy, and then we're going to paste it on dark grey solid, and we're going to select subtract, and then we're going to click this little inverted box. So it's going to take away anything that isn't in this, and there you can see it disappears from the out. So that was subtract on this layer, and then click the inverted box. So you've taken everything of this mask away from outside this mask. Very confusing sometimes when you get inverted masks and things on top of each other, but you'll get the hang of it the more you use it. So there we go, we've got a license plate. Doesn't look great, but it's good enough for what we're going to do today. So now you can close that composition, go back to our footage, and you can see here's our license plate. Let's turn the rest of our layers on, and let's open up the track solid and the transform section, and you'll see here that it has lots of positional information and lots of orientation information, and we're going to take both of those things. So command and click to select both of them, command C to copy. We're going to go to our license plate, we're going to make it a 3D layer. You can see it jumps down there because it's in 3D space now, and we're going to click Control V to paste it, and you can see instantly it's gone over here and is now sitting on top of our pink solid. But it's kind of the wrong position, so let's turn the pink solid off. We don't need that anymore. Drag it down to the bottom, get rid of it. So you can see it's not quite in the right place, and that's because the license plate's curved and it's a different shape to our composition. So what we need to do is try and make this license plate look like it fits over that one, and we're going to do that with some scaling. So first of all, take the scale, unclick the link so that it doesn't constrain the proportions on all of sides, because we're going to want them to be different. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to drag the horizontal scale out so it's about a bit wider, and then we'll change the vertical scale a bit, and then we're going to change the Z rotation until it starts to look like it fits a bit better. But now you can see, if I just turn it off quickly, it looks like it's further away, doesn't it? Now, we can't just move this layer, because if we actually move it, we're going to change its position in space and it won't track anymore. But what we can do is we can change the anchor point for where this layer is positioned, attached to position-wise. So if I change the position, I'll show you what happens. So let's position it over here. Now when I scale, let's go out a bit. Now when I scale, actually it doesn't look too bad, but let's turn that away. If we change the Z, for example, and the down, and then we scale the whole thing up to try and make it fit. Now you'll see that although it fits over the license plate, as I do the track, it doesn't hang quite right to the plate. You can see at that point the bottom appears. And that's because we've actually changed where it sits in space. So the license plate has information about its position in space, the real one on the car. And if we change where our layer sits in that three-dimensional area, it will no longer fit over that license plate as the camera moves, because it will actually be in a different place. So you'll get parallax and depth change between the two. So let's just correct all that. Go back to where we were. I've gone too far. Oh my god. Wrong buttons. Edit. Can't redo. Undo cut layers. Right. So let's put that license plate in the right place, and we'll do that with anchor points, because that will keep it in the same depth space, the same position left and right. It'll just change where our layer appears to be. So we're going to drag the anchor point across and maybe up a little bit, and then we're going to scale our license plate a bit more. Zoom in so we've got an idea of where it's going. Make sure the scale works both ways. We want it to be as high as the license plate, and then we want it to fit over the blue and down a bit like that, maybe a tiny bit wider, something like that. And then you can turn it on and off and just check that it looks like it's, maybe you could do with a tiny bit more rotation, so maybe minus 6.5, just so it sits a little nicer. And then, with any luck, if we zoom out, we should be able to see that it now tracks to the car. Now, like I say, it's a bit dodgy at the start, but it more or less does. So at the start you can see, if I zoom in over here, the U is out on the start, which means the track didn't do so well at the start of the footage. And you can see by about, maybe about frame 120, it sits in the right position. So what we could do, and this is a fix, this is the sort of thing you'll have to do in these sorts of shots sometimes, is we'll put a keyframe at that anchor point because we like where that is, and then we'll go back to the worst part, which is it frame 1? Maybe here, and just correct that position a bit. And with any luck, that should help it hold through that section. So now, if we zoom out and play the whole thing, yeah, I think we've got away with that, more or less. But now we've got to correct our layer a little to fit it in the scene. So the first thing, let's have a look at this. If you zoom in, you can see this is pretty pixelated. And that is because our masks aren't rasterized within the layer. If we come out and then we rasterize the layer, Ah, it's 3D space. Can't do that. Idiot. Ignore everything I just said. So what we're going to do now is we are going to try and correct this a little bit visually. So we're going to right click, Effect, Color Correction, Hue and Saturation, because if you turn the layer off, you're going to see that's pretty dark license plate and ours is pretty bright. So let's just bring the license plate down a little in color. Have a look again, something more like that. And maybe bring the saturation down as well. It's a bit bright. And I think we're going to just scale it up a little bit as well because it's a little bit wide. And then maybe correct the still a bit high as well. You can always make it a little bit bigger to hide some of the edges. So something like that. There we go. And then, yeah, that'll work. So that's a bit tied into the car, but you'll see that you get bits in the shot where it's darker and then it lightens up, and we want ours to lighten up a little bit too. So let's just work out some of those places. So zoom out, follow the camera, scroll through and try and work out where it starts to get light. So it's really dark, dark, dark. And then it starts to get light somewhere around here quite slowly. So let's just put a marker on this by selecting your layer, and on the keypad, the little asterisk, you can play that and press that and you'll get a marker. So let's put a marker there. And then it zooms up and it's probably brightest about here, maybe somewhere there. Let's put a marker there. And then it gets dark toward just right at the end, it starts to get dark. So maybe we'll put one there. And it's probably a little bit lighter there, and then it gets darker to here. So let's put one there. And then using your markers, you can set some keyframes for your hue and saturation. So if we put a keyframe here, so this, let's turn our layer back on again. So that's still a bit light, so I'm going to pull that down. But now our shadow is very dark, so let's just open up license plate. Yours might not be, mine is, and let's just. I didn't want to do that on that. I wanted to change the opacity of the layer. So let's change that there and have a look. That looks a bit better as the thing, but now the whole thing looks a bit dark. So let's just pump that up a little bit. So maybe 65. So that's probably our darkest point, and then it's a little bit lighter here, so maybe minus 60. That's probably too much, minus 63. And that just gives us a little darkening before it gets very light. So here it's about the same, and then here we're going to make it really light. So let's pull that up to something like that. How's that? Yeah, that's not too bad. And then at the end it just gets a tiny bit darker, so just for sinking in, let's make it 51. So it's just a teeny bit darker. And last but not least, let's give it some blur, because if you look at the footage itself, that's pretty blurry. You know, that's not, you can't even read what's down the bottom. And I know ours is small anyway, but ours is a little pixelated, and we don't really want that. So let's just, is that going to help? No. It's weird that it's so pixelated. But anyway, so let's choose our selection tool, right click on our license plate layer, effect, blur and sharpen, Gaussian blur. Let's hit repeat edge pixels, and let's blur it up a little bit till it looks nicer. So something like maybe 15. And then you can turn the layer off and just have a look. Does that look kind of, I think the colour of our plate's a bit wrong, isn't it? Let's just layer solid settings, and let's just change it to, it's almost a blue grey and it's a bit lighter than that. Let's try that. That looks better. And our blue's the wrong colour, so let's just layer solid settings. It needs to be less purple and it needs to be a little bit brighter and more saturated, something like that. Not great, but it's close enough. We could play with that for a while if we want to. So now that's maybe a tiny bit more, just so that looks much better embedded now. And one thing we're going to do now is we're going to put motion blur on, because we want it to move like the rest of the shot does. So you click this little ball icon with its ghosted trails behind it. I think that's what that represents. And then make sure this blue one here is turned on. That turns on the motion blur for the scene, and this turns on the motion blur for each layer. And then, hopefully, click fit to 100% if you've got a small window. Let's see how we feel about it. So it's a little wobbly at the start, but we knew that was going to happen anyway. But that's not bad. And in fact, if you were making a film and you know, this was the footage you were presented with, which I should say was shot at FHD, not full HD, and was shot with no attempt to get exposure right or anything, and you can see it's pretty dark down there in the bottom of the car front, and pretty exposed in the rest of the scene. So there's a lot the camera had to work with. And also don't forget the license plate is curved, which is why there's a little wobble, because it's not actually flat to camera. So that is your camera tracking tutorial. Have a go at that and let me know how you get on. See if you can do better. I would spend a lot more time refining this if it was for a client, but for our sorts of purposes, I think we'll get away with that in terms of teaching you the techniques. And yeah, see how you do. Cool.